On November 19, 2025, police moved in on what they say was a $16.5 million drug operation running through Western Sydney. At the center of it wasn't a career criminal, but a former professional rugby league player. Epirama Navala once ran out for the Parramatta Eels, represented Fiji on the World Cup stage, and lived a future most athletes dream of. Now, police allege he was directing a criminal network tied to the rising KVT gang. In a single day, officers seized around 40 kilograms of drugs, explosive precursors, and evidence of an operation supplying up to 55 kilograms in total. 14 serious charges followed. This isn't just a drug bust. It's a story of opportunity, collapse, and how fast the underworld closes in. Who was Epirama Navala really? Before we get into the charges, it's important to understand who Epirama Navala was before Tuesday morning changed everything. This wasn't a nobody pulled off the street. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, Navala was a professional rugby league player. He ran out for the Parramatta Eels in the NRL and later represented Fiji on the World Cup stage. He had the talent, he had the pedigree, and more importantly, he had a future. Navala scored tries, made tackles, and lived the life many young players dream of. At one point, the path in front of him was clear professional sport, structure, and legitimacy. But somewhere along the way, that path broke. By 2025, at nearly 30 years old, Navala was no longer playing professional rugby league. The opportunities were gone. The career had stalled. And according to police, what came next was a move into something far darker, an alleged role not as an ex-athlete, but as the central figure in a $16.5 million drug supply network. This is where the story turns tragic. This wasn't a man without options. Navala had access, credibility, and a way out that most people never get. Yet police allege he chose a different road, one that led straight into the heart of organized crime. An operation too big to ignore. When police executed search warrants across multiple locations, what they uncovered was impossible to overlook. Around 40 kilograms of illicit drugs were seized in a single day, drugs with an estimated street value of $12.5 million, but investigators say that wasn't the full picture. According to police, the 3 men involved were responsible for supplying roughly 55 kilograms of drugs in total. It's valued at about $16.5 million on the street. Let that sink in. $16.5 million. Enough money to reshape families, neighborhoods, and futures or completely destroy them. And authorities say this wasn't a one-off shipment or a bad decision made in desperation. This was a sustained operation, a business, an alleged drug enterprise operating over time. What made the case even more serious was what else police found. Alongside the drugs, officers seized explosive precursors, chemicals commonly used in large-scale drug manufacturing or even bomb making. That detail matters. It suggests planning, capability, and infrastructure. This wasn't street-level dealing. This was organized, industrial, and calculated. The charges tell the real story when Epirama Navala stood before the court. The charges laid out by prosecutors painted a clear picture of how deeply police believe he was involved. 5 counts of supplying a commercial quantity of drugs. 4 counts of supplying an indictable quantity. But the case goes far beyond drug supply. Navala is also charged with directing the activities of a criminal group, an allegation that places him not on the sidelines, but at the center, making decisions and giving instructions. There's a charge for ongoing drug supply, which signals this wasn't a single deal or a brief lapse in judgment. Police allege this was routine, standard operation inside what they describe as a functioning drug network. Then come the additional charges: handling explosive precursors without authorization, knowingly dealing with the proceeds of crime, meaning investigators believe money from illegal activity was spent, moved, or concealed, and participating in a criminal group. 14 serious charges in total. Allegations that, if proven, point to a complete fall from professional sport into the core of organized crime, with very little room left for a future beyond prison walls. The KVT factor. Inside Sydney's rising underworld to understand why police came down so hard in this case, you first need to understand who KVT really are. And this is where the story expands far beyond one former rugby league player. KVT stands for KVT, a word that simply means Fijian in the Fijian language. The group is made up largely of young men of Fijian background, many of them raised in western Sydney suburbs like Mount Druitt, Marylands, and Edmondson Park. These are the same streets they grew up on in the beginning. KVT wasn't some polished criminal organization. It started as a loose group of young men looking for safety, respect, and a sense of belonging in tough neighborhoods where survival often comes before ambition. But at some point, things changed. By the early 2020s, KVT had caught the attention of the Alamedan crime family, one of Sydney's most powerful and deeply entrenched organized crime networks. With long-standing influence inside the Lebanese-Australian underworld, the Alameddines saw potential in KVT, young, disciplined, loyal, and willing to use violence. According to investigators, the offer was simple. Act as our street-level muscle. Be our enforcers. Do the work others don't want to do. Owned, the money will follow. For young men coming from disadvantaged backgrounds, that kind of offer is almost impossible to ignore. KVT became the engine on the ground for the Alamedan operation. While the Alamedans focused on high-level drug importation, international trafficking routes, and complex logistics, KVT handled what kept the streets under controlled debt collection. Violent enforcement, intimidation, territorial dominance, and local drug supply, they were effective. So effective that over time, they gained more independence. By 2024 and into 2025, intelligence suggests KVT was no longer just following orders. They were running their own operations, making their own decisions, and controlling their own drug supply networks. This is the world police allege. Epirama Navala stepped into not as a reckless teenager, but as a grown man. Someone with professional experience, established connections, and a network built over years. Why police moved when they did there is something important people often miss in cases like this. Police action doesn't happen overnight. November 19th wasn't a spontaneous decision. It was the end of a long, calculated process. Strikeforce Duncan originally began as an investigation into stolen vehicles, so-called kill cars used in serious crimes and then dumped to destroy evidence. But everything changed in May 2025, when Task Force Falcon was formed to specifically target organized crime and gang violence across Sydney. Strikeforce Duncan was absorbed into that broader operation. That's when the focus sharpened. By September 2025, detectives were zeroed in on the alleged drug supply activities of Navala, Revoker, and Sukar Navalyu. For nearly 2 months, police watched. They listened. They tracked movements, intercepted communications, and quietly assembled their case piece by piece. By November, investigators believed they had enough evidence, and that's when they moved. This matters because it shows the arrests weren't reactive. They were deliberate, a targeted strike against what police viewed as a serious and ongoing threat to public safety. The courtroom. Reality, when bail isn't even an option. When the 3 men appeared before magistrates in Liverpool, Penrith, and Sutherland local courts, something telling happened. None of them applied for bail. That decision speaks volumes. When defense lawyers don't even attempt to argue for bail, it usually means they understand the strength of the prosecution's case. When multiple charges are backed by surveillance, intercepted communications, physical evidence, and financial records, applying for bail can be pointless. Instead, focus shifts to damage control, preparing for what comes next. Magistrate Claire Farron described the alleged offending as very serious. Brahma Navala remains in custody, with the prosecution's full brief of evidence expected in January. From there, the legal process intensifies, formal disclosure, pretrial motions, negotiations, and ultimately either a trial or guilty pleas. The stakes couldn't be higher. Supplying a commercial quantity of drugs carries a maximum penalty of 20 years in prison, and Navala faces multiple charges at that level. If prosecutors push the case into the large commercial quantity category, the sentence could reach life imprisonment. When you add allegations of directing a criminal group, dealing with proceeds of crime, and handling explosive precursors, the potential outcome is decades behind bars. This is no longer a story about rugby league. It's about how deeply someone can fall and how unforgiving the underworld truly is. The fallout when a career ends overnight. This is where the real human cost becomes impossible to ignore. The New South Wales Rugby League acted quickly. Epirama Navala was removed from the register, and the message was clear. His registration had expired, and while serious criminal charges remain unresolved, re-registration is not even being considered. That decision effectively ends his professional sporting career instantly. Regardless of how the court case unfolds, whether he's convicted or not, the door to rugby league is closed. The NRL, the NRL, and every affiliated competition are no longer options. The future he once had in the sport, the legitimacy that came with it, is gone. For many, this feels reasonable. Professional sports bodies can't be associated with allegations of large-scale drug trafficking. Still, there's an undeniable sadness in it. This was a man who played at the highest level, who represented his country, who had talent, discipline, and experience. Now, those achievements are overshadowed by criminal accusations. He's no longer known for what he did on the field, but for what he's alleged to have done off it. And then there's the collateral damage. Epirama Navala has a brother, another man with the same name, who may also be a rugby league player. According to reporting on this case, while one brother was allegedly building a criminal operation, the other was building a legitimate sporting career. He had nothing to do with this investigation, and yet he now carries the weight of association. Same name, same family. A burden he didn't choose. Why this case goes beyond one player, this story isn't just about a former rugby league player losing everything. It's a window into a much larger problem facing Sydney. Organized crime today isn't chaotic or impulsive. It's structured, layered, and deeply connected. Groups like KVT aren't operating on the fringes anymore. They're embedded inside larger criminal ecosystems. They move serious quantities of drugs, manufacture explosive materials, launder money, enforce territory with violence. These aren't expendable street-level players. They're critical components in sophisticated criminal networks. The scale of this investigation proves that. Police were able to identify an alleged $16.5 million operation, monitor it for months, coordinate raids across multiple suburbs, and arrest key figures in a single operation. That shows progress. It shows capability, but it also reveals how large these networks have become. Task. Force Falcon alone involves more than 150 detectives focused on organized crime. Dozens of arrests have been made. Tens of millions of dollars in cash and assets have been seized. And still, the threat remains, as one source points out. With Kaz Hamid allegedly directing operations from Iraq and violent incidents continuing across multiple states, the broader organized crime problem in Australia is far from under control. What we still don't know there are questions this case hasn't answered yet, and they matter. What role did Epirama Navala actually play? Was he a leader making strategic calls? A mid-level figure managing distribution? Or a supplier trying to climb higher? The charges offer clues. The allegation of directing a criminal group points toward leadership, but the full picture won't emerge until the case moves through the courts. What was his true relationship with the Alameda network? Had KVT fully broken away, or were they still operating under that influence? And if there was a split, did Navala know about Aitor? Was he acting under old assumptions? And then there's the biggest question of all. Why? Was it financial pressure? The pull of fast money? Loyalty to people he grew up with? Or simply being unable to walk away once he was in too deep? We may never get clear answers. The justice system isn't designed to explain motivation. It deals in evidence, timelines, and charges, not personal reasons. And in the end, that may be the most unsettling part of this story. The ripple effects this arrest doesn't stop with 3 men in handcuffs. The impact spreads outward. It reaches their families first, the people who now have to live with the fallout, the stigma, and the uncertainty that follows serious criminal charges. It reaches the rugby league community, which is forced to confront uncomfortable questions. How organized crime finds its recruits, how money and status can lure people away from legitimate paths, and how someone with real talent and genuine opportunity can still make decisions that lead to total collapse. It also affects the Fijian Australian community. Once again, young men sharing the same heritage are being publicly linked to organized crime. There has been frustration, particularly from Fiji, over media coverage that risks painting an entire community with the same brush. At the same time, there is an acknowledgement that KVT is real, that the issue exists, and that it needs to be addressed honestly rather than ignored. And it affects the neighborhoods of Western Sydney, where these groups operate. Places where drug distribution lowers quality of life, where gang-related violence creates fear, and where instability becomes part of everyday reality for people who have nothing to do with the criminal world around them. A necessary reality check. By the time you're watching this video, things may have changed. The case may have progressed. Bail applications may have been filed and rejected again. Additional charges could be laid, or, in a less likely scenario, given the seriousness of the allegations, some charges might be withdrawn. The legal system moves slowly, but it does move. What won't change is that Epirama Navala has already lived through one of the worst mornings of his life. What won't change is that his rugby league career is, for all practical purposes, over. And what won't change is that investigators have dismantled that, at least for now, a drug operation alleged to be worth Shirlu Dan Wu million. Whether that operation represented a major blow to Sydney's organized crime ecosystem, whether it significantly reduced the flow of drugs on the streets, or whether it merely slowed KVT down temporarily, so those answers will only come with time. The final analysis: this case sits at the crossroads of sport, organized crime, opportunity, and choice. It's a stark reminder that opportunity alone doesn't protect anyone, that talent and connections don't guarantee good outcomes, and that law enforcement is prepared to commit serious resources to dismantling criminal networks. For viewers interested in true crime, organized crime, or the collision between professional sports and the underworld, This case offers a clear look at how modern gang operations function nerd-connected, structured, disciplined, and run like businesses. And for Epirama Navala, his brother, his family, and everyone linked to this story, it's a reminder that decisions made in moments, acts, accepting money from the wrong people, supplying drugs, directing criminal activity can echo for decades. Careers end, futures collapse. Reputations are rewritten permanently. The Dawn raids of November 19, 2025 closed one chapter. For those involved, the real reckoning is only beginning.